With that, I guess it's my honor to introduce Jim Mundorf. I'm a broken record, but part of my paycheck is I get to meet all these people that are thinkers and they're curious and they want to know how things work. Jim's probably one of the main researchers that I've met so far, besides Bill and the staff themselves. So here's Jim's written bio. Jim Mundorf is the owner and contributor to Lonesome Lands Media, where he gives boots-on-the-ground perspective on ag news. He also owns the Drover House, where for 19 years he has crafted and sold Longhorn artwork. Jim also works on the family farm and cattle operation Twin Pines Farm in southwest Iowa. And I've been lucky enough to be on Jim's podcast, and I'm lucky enough to have him to call when I have questions on things. You can support Jim at Lonesome Lands. You go to his website, because independent journalists that do their own thinking, the way to keep them free and independent is to support them. Another way you can support him is this. These horns he made for me for the benefit auction later, but on the Drover's house, it's pretty awesome. He's an artsy guy. He loves it when I say that. But you go to the Drover's house and he makes some really cool stuff out of horns, kind of a testament to the animals that we all raise. So with that, I'd like everybody to welcome Jim Mundorf.
Thank you. Thanks to RCAF for having me out here. The beef checkoff, that's what they wanted me to come and talk about. And so for anyone not familiar, the beef checkoff is a program that steals $1 per head of cattle from every man, woman, and child's check every time they sell cattle. That money goes into what my friend Von Meyer calls a money laundering shell game. And that shell game is operated by the National Cattlemen's Beef Association. And so in the past, I've talked a lot about the checkoff. I've done a video where I break everything down of where your dollar goes when it leaves your check and how it ends up going back to the National Cattlemen's Beef Association. And I've had graphs and all the facts and figures and went all through that. It's about an hour-long video. And then I also did another video where I talked to Von Meyer, who is a former beef board member. He had served on the beef board, and he explained to me how the members of the beef board really have no control over any of the money that's spent on the checkoff. It comes down to a 20-person operating committee, is what they're called. And 10 of those people are selected directly by the NCBA, and the other 10 are more than likely NCBA members, the majority. And so when they asked me to come and talk about this, I had to think, I need something new to talk about. I've kind of went over a lot of it, and when you put this stuff on YouTube, you can't just keep saying the same thing over and over, and I don't like repeating myself. So what's been going on lately is this EID mandate, and I believe that has been lobbied for by the NCBA. And I got to thinking about that and how what came to my mind is when you lay down with dogs, you're going to get fleas. Because what the beef checkoff forces you to do is lay down with the NCBA and the USDA and these corrupt organizations, and now you have fleas. And this goes back to, these are things like EID, market collusion, the fight for actual cattle market reform, or the fight against actual cattle market reform, the sustainability agenda, the sustainability development goals that the cattle industry wants, or the industry leaders want you to be a part of, and how the NCBA has committed on your behalf to net zero by the year 2040. These are all fleas from the corrupt, flea-ridden dog that you're forced to lie down with, which is the NCBA. And I think the EID mandate is probably the best example of who the NCBA is and how they operate. Because if you remember back in 2023 is when the rule was announced, introduced, and few weeks after the rule was introduced was the NCBA convention. And if you remember, during that convention, both the USDA and NCBA did everything they possibly could to put the fear of God into you about foot and mouth disease. They would say it's any day now we could see foot and mouth disease show up in our cattle herds. I remember someone said it may already be here and we don't even know it. And it would destroy the industry, and the only way we could save ourselves is electronic ID ear tags. A few weeks after that convention, the USDA happened to give the NCBA $445,396 to strengthen the beef traceability program. There was no explanation of how that money was going to strengthen the program or what it would really be used to. It was just almost $500,000 handed over from between friends, really. And if you go on throughout the year, well, a few weeks after that, they extended the comment period. Actually, I think it was a few days after that. They gave that money and then they extended the comment period, which made me think they're wanting NCBA members to comment on this USDA rule and say that they're in for it. USDA president had multiple op-eds. They went throughout the whole year kind of promoting this idea that we had to have EID tags or the industry would be destroyed by a disease. And then we come to this year's NCBA convention, and they introduce a policy that would mandate all cattle to have an electronic identification ear tag by the year 2026. But people found out about it, and the industry, a number of people made calls, a number of people in this room kind of raised hell about it. Corbett Wall every day on his feeder flash kind of explained what it was and what it was about, and it was able to be stopped. And they were not able to pass any policy that mandated electronic ID tags. But even though the entire industry kind of showed that this is not what they wanted, a couple weeks after their convention, the omnibus comes out, and there's $15 million in it, in this bill, that to pay for mandated electronic ID tags that have not yet been mandated. And the NCBA puts out a press release that they are for the omnibus, and they want Congress to pass it. And then once it gets passed, they put out another press release kind of bragging about how they got that $15 million in there to pay for these mandated ear tags that you have told them that you don't want, forcing the U.S. taxpayer to pay for the tags that you don't want. And then a few days ago, I got to get my clicker here. A congressman put this on Twitter. USDA is mandating electronic ID tags in cattle without congressional authorization. This is the beginning of the end of the independent cattlemen. But Farm Bureau and Beef USA support it because they are the foxes watching the hen house. I tagged them. Let's see if they respond. Beef USA is NCBA's Twitter handle, or whatever you want to call it. Last I checked, they did not respond. But this is someone, and there he retweeted Harriet Hagman, who put out what she thought about the electronic ID tags. And my apologies to anybody who showed up to see Harriet Hagman, who was supposed to be in this time slot, but I am not her. But what he is telling you here, he's a congressman. He walks through those halls. He knows what the lobbyists are pushing for. He is telling you that even though the cattle industry did not ever vote on a policy that would support a mandate, that both Farm Bureau and Beef USA are beef checkoff contractors, and they both support it, meaning they have been lobbying for it against their own members' wishes. And so I put a lot of this stuff, like I said, I put a lot of this stuff on YouTube when I talk about it. And I'm not good at responding to the comments, but I will look through there and to kind of just gauge how people feel. And I've noticed there's a lot of people that watch my stuff that have no involvement in the cattle business. They just are for some reason interested. And their comments a lot of times are confusion, kind of, why is this happening? And you can kind of tell that the cattleman is a symbol of independence and freedom and rugged individualism. And they're wondering how this happens where this symbol of freedom is now kind of controlled by these corrupt organizations. And so that's kind of what I want to try to explain today. And I guess for the people in this room, the reason that you are forced to fund these corrupt organizations is because of the beef checkoff. And that is the law of the land. It's the law that you're required to give your at least $1 head when you sell your cattle. And that is controlled not by elected officials, but by bureaucrats at the USDA. You can't vote them out. And the USDA, like I said, is partnered with the NCBA in pushing a lot of the agenda that I regard to in the beginning as fleas. So they will allow NCBA to do whatever they want with checkoff funds. No audits, no referendums like they're required to have, just full-on corruption. And that's the law of the land. And that law was created in 1985 through what was called the Beef Act and Order. According to the Beef Act and Order, that money is to be used to enable cattle producers to establish, finance, and carry out a coordinated program of research, producer and consumer information, and promotion to improve, maintain, and develop markets for cattle, beef, and beef products. And so in 1985, the average American would consume 77 pounds of beef per year. And to me, that doesn't seem like a whole heck of a lot, but this year, in present day, the average American is now consuming 57 pounds of beef per year. So since the checkoff was started, 20 pounds per less per person in America is being consumed per year. And the USDA just reported that in the last 5 years, the U.S. lost 107,000 cattle farms and ranches. So the beef checkoff is really the failure that can't stop bragging about how successful they are. And what the Beef Act and Order describes is a coordinated program of research, producer, and consumer information and promotion to improve, maintain, and develop markets. And that is a marketing plan. And for cattle people, a marketing plan is usually something different than what it is kind of for the rest of the civilized world. For folks not selling based on a commodity market, marketing means advertising, pricing, product placement, and really everything. Marketing is everything, and everything is marketing. That initially is when Jaden asked me for a title for this thing, I hadn't written it at all, and that is what I was going to title it. But then I kind of felt like that sounded like a good time to take a nap or a college lecture type of title. And so I changed it to the fleas that we are forced to lay down with. Fleas from the dogs we are forced to lay down with. Not as easy to say, but I thought that sounded better, a little more interesting. And the reason I did that is because marketing is everything and everything is marketing. And a little bit about me. I graduated high school in 1998, and when I walked out of my last class, I can remember thinking, I hope I never set foot in a classroom again. And I graduated on Sunday, and on Monday, I started work for the local construction guy. And a few months later, I walked out of my next new job, which was O'Reilly Auto Parts. And I drove across town and into a high school classroom where I sat down for my very first college class. And it was a night class, and it was intro to marketing or something like that. And at the beginning of every class, the teacher would say, it was one of those satellite classes where the teacher was on a screen in front of the class, and there was a bunch of area classrooms all kind of connected together. Back in 1998, it was before the online classes, but this is what they did in, I guess, rural communities and community college areas. So, but at the beginning of every class, the teacher would pick someone out, and she would say, James, what is marketing? They would call me James back then because that's my real name, and that's what was on the class list, and so I would just go with it. But she would say, James, what is marketing? And I would say, marketing is everything, and everything is marketing. And then she would go on to teach the class, and she would teach about the 5 Ps and advertising agencies and just the entire marketing industry. And she would bring all of these lessons back and say that marketing is everything and everything is marketing. And she would drill that into our heads. And so I went on to graduate from the prestigious Iowa Western Community College with a 2-year degree in marketing management. And the lesson that marketing is everything and everything is marketing is one of the very few lessons I ever have remembered from college. But the reason I remember it is because every day I think about it and use it. Like Brett said, for 19 years I've been, one of my main sources of income has been putting together longhorn cattle horns. I build mounts and artwork and different things, and one of the reasons I've been able to build and maintain that business is because I learned that marketing was everything and everything was marketing. And to bring that into like an RCAF situation, if you have any friends like I do who kind of believe and agree with RCAF on pretty much all or most of the issues, and they're not members, and you say, how come you're not a member of RCAF? And they'll say, well, because I don't like this guy, or I don't like that guy, or I don't like what somebody put on Twitter, or somebody put on Facebook, or things like that. And so one thing to remember is if you're a person associated with RCAF and what you put online and everything you can kind of do sometimes can be perceived as marketing for RCAF. And it's not always fair, but that's just kind of how things are. And for me, the biggest part about marketing is trust. I sell pretty much everything online, and so people send me money, and they trust that I'm going to send them a quality product. And I think trust is kind of the basis of all business. If you're selling cattle, you have to, your customer has to trust that these cattle are what you say they are. But for the beef checkoff, to go back, who is their customer? One thing I don't think is talked about enough or thought about enough is who is the beef checkoff's customer. Your customer is who pays you and who your income comes from. And the beef checkoff's customer is you, the cattle producer, who pays them. I think of the beef checkoff sometimes as like a marketing firm, and you are supposed to pay them, and they're supposed to create demand in beef, and that is supposed to come back in returns for higher cattle prices. That's the way it's supposed to work. And you're supposed to trust them. And so, how do they do it? How do they try to gain your trust? I lost my, oh, there it is. It's down here. It's not up there. There we go. 70% of consumers say BQA boosts their trust in beef. I found this ad in Working Ranch Magazine's Facebook page. And this might be the stupidest ad I've ever seen. I've worked around cattle all my life, pretty much, and until I started Lonesome Lands, which was 6 years ago, I don't think I could really explain to you what BQA was. I could maybe tell you what it stood for, but I couldn't really explain the program. And I would guess that probably 99.9% of beef consumers have absolutely no idea what BQA is. I don't think that's going out of the realm of reality. And so what this really is just a bold-faced lie. And this is how they try to gain your trust. But this is part of funding that you pay for. You're paying for this ad. $1.8 million is being spent of checkoff dollars is being spent this year on producer communication. And that comes out in ads like this. And when I think of that marketing firm analogy of you're the customer and the checkoff is your marketing firm, I think of maybe like a big company like Coca-Cola, and they're sitting down with their marketing firm, and their marketing firm says, we need $2 million to make ads that we're going to show to you to show you how good of a job we're doing. I don't think it really works that way. I'm never been a part of these big companies, but I kind of doubt that happens. So what is this ad really trying to tell you? And the most famous advertising guy I know of is a guy by the name of Don Draper. And he's actually a character in a TV show called Mad Men. And it's about a Madison Avenue advertising agency. And in the very first episode, he describes advertising. He says, advertising is based on one thing, happiness. And you know what happiness is? Happiness is the smell of a new car. It's freedom from fear. It's a billboard on the side of the road that screams with reassurance that whatever you're doing is okay. You are okay. Now, if you've ever designed advertising or bought in advertising or been involved in any part of it, hopefully what I just said to you sounded like complete BS. Because if you watch Mad Men, you might remember that Don Draper knew that what he was saying was complete BS. To understand this definition of advertising, you have to know who he was talking to. And he was talking to the owners of Lucky Strike cigarettes. And the year was 1960, and it had just become illegal for cigarette manufacturers to make health claims about their cigarettes being good for you. There was now undeniable proof that cigarettes were causing cancer. And so Don Draper was describing what advertising needed to be for them. For them, it needed to scream with reassurance that whatever you're doing is okay. And so when you are looking down at your sale barn receipt and you see those dollars coming out of your checks, this ad is screaming with reassurance that what you are doing is okay, that you are okay. This ad and many others like them. You've all seen the ads throughout for the beef checkoff. I did a video a while back that had 1.4 million views. I sat down in the back of my horse trailer, and the next thing I knew, there was 1 million people who'd seen what I was doing. But I showed a magazine, Drover's Magazine, and if you're familiar with that, they have about 10 pages per magazine. And in that magazine, they had 3 different beef checkoff ads. And those are screaming to you that you are okay. But you're not okay. The last time I was up here, I went to Rapid City and I talked about the lie that has been agreed upon that cattle are bad for the environment. And when I got home, I put it on YouTube. And somebody took it and clipped it up and they put it on TikTok. So I became a TikToker. And I didn't even have to dance. But my 14-year-old daughter saw it, and she said, we were driving in the pickup, and she says, they taught me, they taught in my class that beef is bad for the environment. Cattle are bad for the environment. And I said, really? And she said, yeah. And I thought, I live in a rural Iowa community where junior high students are now being taught that beef is bad for the environment. And I thought, if she is being taught that cattle and beef are being bad for the environment, then I guarantee you the vast majority of junior high students in this country are being taught that beef and cattle are bad for the environment, and that eating less beef is good for the environment. Right now in New York City, they've pulled meat off the menu. In New York City public schools, they pulled meat off the menu for at least 2 days a week. And the New York City mayor has come out and said he's revealed a plan where he's trying to implement a plan that reduces the amount of meat consumption for the entire city to save the environment. And these are all lies that are told about the cattle industry. And so what is your beef checkoff dollars doing to prevent these lies from coming true or from being told And all of these kids, my daughter heard about this. She heard that cattle were bad for the environment, and she never even said anything to me. Like, we live around cattle. My business is based on cattle. She shows show cattle, but she's a 14-year-old kid. And when they hear something, they just kind of go with it. And 14-year-old kids all across this country are hearing that, and they're going with it. And so what is the Beef Checkoff main focus? One of their main focuses, NASCAR. They sponsored the Daytona 300 this past year. Beef, it's what's for dinner at the Daytona 300. And if that seems a little silly to you, I don't know how many NASCAR fans are trying to cut beef out of their diet, but I think it's probably less than what's going on in New York City. And I haven't seen a real beef checkoff plan for what's going on in New York City. And if this seems a little silly to you, the states of Texas, Nebraska, and Oklahoma took their state beef council money, which is also checkoff money that comes out of your pockets, and they sponsored the National Finals Rodeo. So we had Beef, It's What's for Dinner ads on TV at the National Finals Rodeo. And that is because we don't have a marketing firm to promote beef. As far as those states go, I mean, what I thought of was when you hand a bunch of marketing money to a bunch of cowboys and they say, what should we do with it? And they said, well, let's give it to the rodeo. But so, when I write about this stuff, once in a while, I get comments about, I try to figure out who supports this. I'm always trying to figure out who supports this, and I feel like people who follow me are trying to figure out who supports this and how can they support this. And when I write about this stuff, I'll get a comment every once in a while that kind of gives me a little glimpse into who supports this. And one time, I put something on Twitter. I put this up. This was around NCBA convention. There was a lot of people going, and I put up, NCBA is a lobbying organization. They lobby against any and all market legislation that would help producers. What many fail to realize is they also lobby producers to get them to go along with it. They use your checkoff dollars through the convention to do it. I said, remember that. And luckily for me, someone commented. And they said, actually, I got to sit down with the NCBA office in Washington, D.C. and talk about what they do there and their purpose. And after talking with them for 2 hours, I can tell you with confidence they are not lobbying against cattle producers. And I said, thank you for proving my point perfectly. And even after that, they didn't understand that they were making my point for me. And they said, I used to be on the same side as you until I actually sat down with one of them. I still think they could be spending money on different things, but I support them more now after meeting them in person and not just reading articles, watching videos on my phone. So she doubled down on proving my point, and I said, you do realize that's a lobbyist's job, to sit down with people and convince them to support them. And yes, they are good at it. The leadership at NCBA, that is their job. They're lobbyists. They sit down with some of the most powerful people in the world and try to get them to support them and what they want done. And I use these tweets and I put them in an article I wrote about, it was called CattleCon, One Hell of a Party. And in that article, I described how the NCBA convention is used and the checkoff is funded, funds the NCBA convention, and then the NCBA uses your checkoff dollars to kind of indoctrinate their members. And they indoctrinate beef board members, and they fly them down there for free, and that's where the beef board meeting is. And after that article, someone did me a great favor, and they commented on Facebook. And they said, I was at the NCBA convention. I paid my own way, as well as 6,000 other cattlemen. I spent 3 straight days going to meeting after meeting. Not one meeting was about political issues. There were some if you wanted to attend, but the vast majority were about things I could do on my farm to be better. Heifer development, parasitic control, market undated, etc. The trade show was awesome and a one-stop shop for all things cattle. I met cattlemen from all across the country. My favorite part, who have a passion for their farms and families. I never miss a cattle convention, and it is worth every penny. And that sounds pretty good. Sounds like a pretty good deal. But I think the interesting part is his favorite part is meeting other cattlemen, because I feel like one of cattlemen's favorite parts is always meeting other cattlemen. And I think that's why a lot of our NCBA state affiliates exist, is because cattlemen like to go and meet other cattlemen and drink beer, and they don't really pay a whole lot of attention to the issues of what's going on at those association meetings. It kind of reminds me, one of my favorite books is called Log of a Cowboy by Andy Adams. And he had went up the cattle trail a couple times in the late 1800s, and then he wrote a book of stories kind of about going up the cattle trail. And in it he talks about people from Kentucky. And he says, if you ever introduce two people from Kentucky that don't know each other, before you can get a word out, they're buying each other drinks and trying to loan each other money. And I kind of felt like that sounded a lot like cattle guys. If they find each other, it's probably why some of us came here this weekend. But that is a big part of it. And he kind of gotten back and forth with me and some other people, and our friend Karina here, I hope she doesn't mind me using her comment, but she said, since we are losing 17,000 cattle operations a year, that doesn't feel exactly like winning. NCBA better start running some new plays before the independent cattle producer goes extinct. And he said, who else is working on this at NCBA convention? I was impressed by how many young people were there, 20 to 40. There were great programs for young ranchers. What I hate about this NCBA bashing is no one is offering any ideas or action. RCAF clearly isn't. I have volunteered for my state affiliate, NCBA, and they have a laser focus on young producers. I was privileged to be a part of the Young Cattlemen's College, which was a free one-year long program for young cattlemen producers. I would say it was a $10,000 cost that NCBA invested in me and hundreds of others. I am a small producer, hundreds of cows, and they have invested in me for a long time. I think Karina came back about how that $10,000 cost may have been part of the checkoff money, but and I'm not sure where he's getting $10,000 from, but this goes back to marketing is everything and everything is marketing. But it also goes back to indoctrinations. He was part of the Young Cattlemen's College, and there was more back and forth, and he went on to say, I didn't go to policy meetings at NCBA. I am very active on the policy side. Been to DC many times to speak my voice, and NCBA has provided me with the opportunity. I know Packers Stockyards Act very well. So I told him that NCBA was against the Packers and not Stockyards Act. But what this whole conversation goes to is from the time he was in college, and he's been to every single NCBA meeting, and he's loved giving them money for it. And he goes there and spends 3 days of going to meetings. And he's been indoctrinated. I mean, these meetings is where they tell you how wonderful NCBA is, how great they're doing, all the important things they're doing, how important they are for the industry. And then 2 weeks after the convention, they go to DC and they tell them, oh, forget about what happened at that convention and what the actual industry wants. We need to have mandated electronic identification ear tags. But here he's talking about the Packers and Stockyards Act that I had mentioned NCBA was against. And he went to 3 days of meetings at this convention and had no idea what I was talking about. And this is this was the 2023 convention. This is their list of priorities. Here's a close-up: combat overly restrictive Packers and Stockyards, GIPSA rules. That is the law that was created to protect you, farmers and ranchers, from predatory beef packers. And he loves NCBA, but he had absolutely he went to 3 days of meetings, had absolutely no idea what their actual policies, political policies were coming out of those meetings. And so, how do we fix that? How do we fix the fact that we have to fund that? And we have now a bill called the Opportunities for Fairness in Farming. and it takes checkoff dollars away from any organization that lobbies elected officials. It was introduced by Mike Lee and Cory Booker. And the main criticism against that act is that some animal rights nuts support it. There's some kind of nutty groups that support it, and so NCBA has taken that and pushed that idea that this is an animal rights bill. And so I got to thinking about that criticism and why animal rights groups would support it. And they will tell you that they don't, that the beef checkoff does such a good job of promoting beef that they don't want that to be able to happen. But we know that that is not true if you've ever looked at how the beef checkoff operates. And so why do the animal rights not support it? And who is the biggest enemy of the animal rights crazy people? And I think if you had one name, you could say Tyson Foods. They hate Tyson Foods. And they want to take funding away from the lobbyists that lobby on behalf of them. And some of the things Tyson Foods has lobbied for that might ring a bell for you is electronic identification ear tags, ESG, environmental social governance. They want you to calculate your greenhouse gas emissions on your cattle. The United Nations Sustainability Development Goals, they're all involved in this ESG stuff. So Tyson Foods, their lobbyist organization, NCBA, if you're wondering why you've heard sustainability for the past few years, it's because these corporate partners that control NCBA are pushing it. And to me, that wouldn't be a bad thing if we take away funding that we're forced to give them. And I like the title of this bill because it's called Opportunities for Fairness in Farming. And that is what... So you have an opportunity, and if you hear anything about opportunities, is they don't come along every day. And an opportunity is something you have to take. And so what this bill is something you have to take. You have to take your checkoff back. And as I was driving out here, I had this all written up, and I was driving out here, and I was coming down the big hill by Chamberlain, and I look over, and there's a billboard, and it says, "Beef, it's what's for dinner." And there's a big checkoff logo under it. And I thought, I wonder how many billboards like that are in New York City or California or being shown to these junior high kids at school who are having meat taken out of their menu. I wondered why would the beef checkoff put a billboard in the middle of cow country in a community that's supported by cattle. Why would they do that? It was almost as if that billboard was screaming with reassurance that what you are doing is okay, that the beef checkoff is okay. It's not okay. You have the opportunity to take your checkoff back, and I hope you take it and push for the pass of the OFF Act. Thank you.